in your short stay in the elevator industry, what are some insights that you really feel like are valuable to share?
So I think that all businesses, it's really the talent of the people. So this whole idea of human capital management, the most important players in having a long-term successful business is having those quality mechanics. I think in US society, there's this like, go to college, you gotta go to college. And if you look in other countries like Germany, there's a respect for someone who works with their hands. And so part of my own wisdom / agenda is to really elevate the value and respect those people have. Because like without that, you get some serious problems in the vertical transportation business. So how do you give those people the respect they deserve? How do you respect their opinions? How do you capture it for the long term? If I was running a service provider, I'd really spend a lot of time. How do you get those people that have their hands on the equipment to understand that you value who they are and the work they do?
Hello, and welcome to the Elevator Careers Podcast, brought to you by the Allred Group. I'm your host, Matt Allred. When talent is mission critical, call the Allred Group. With industry expertise, top talent, and exceptional customer service, you need the Allred Group on your side. Your priority is our priority. Call now, 404-890-0445. In this conversation, I sat down with Lisa Diaz as she shared her unique journey from Wall Street to the elevator industry. We discussed the need to find and maintain your best customers and addressed how AI and technology are changing the trade. Lisa also emphasized the importance of human capital and skilled labor for long-term success in the elevator business. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Matt, thanks for having me. This is an exciting opportunity, and I'm very happy to be part of your podcast speakers.
Yeah, thank you. No, it was great meeting you in Long Beach at the NAEC conference last week, and you've got a unique story, right? And so I thought it'd be a lot of fun to kind of put it out there. And remind me, you've been in the elevator industry, what, about a year and a half or two, something like that?
So I'm a outsider, or I should say I have a different point of view. So by way of background, I spent 35 years on Wall Street, my last 23 at Goldman Sachs, where I was a managing director. And after that time, I'm one of those rare birds who wants to work till they're 90. I know it's crazy.
Sure.
There are some of us. I'm one of them.
Right.
And so I was trained in consulting, and consulting you have to work back. So if you want to work until you're 90, you have to look at industries which are open and supportive of, people with gray hair being part of the organization. Finance isn't one of them.
Okay.
Technology, not so much either. But one of the things I saw was construction and elevators later has the propensity to have, long-term and values people that are willing to roll their hands up and be there for the long term. And actually how I kind of started down the path towards construction, it was kind of this random story. And my mentor was saying to me, he's like, look, if you want to, you got to think about the next chapter. You spent all this time in Wall Street, what do you want to do for the next chapter? Which is kind of a tough question, because when you've worked all your life, you never kind of spend the time. And actually it all happened in Grand Central Station. So I was running to try to catch my train. And I missed my train by like 5 seconds, which is quite a way.
Yeah.
And there are all these tourists who always do the tour of Grand Central, and they're outside the Oyster Bar. And I'm like, what are they learning? Anyway, I tagged along on this tour. And Grand Central, I don't know if you've been there, it's one of my favorite places in New York. It's beautiful. It is the backtrack of movies, marriages, many tourists, and it's a very happy New York place. And I learned that they were going to tear down Grand Central, and Jackie Onassis raised her hands up, and she defended Grand Central. So at the time, there were two amazing stations. One was Penn Station, the other, which I hear was nicer, and then Grand Central. Penn didn't have Jackie O, and Grand Central did. And I was like, wow, this is so amazing, and it's so lasting and important. I want to be part of something that's more tangible and long-term. And the second thing I learned is that if you go in the main vista of Grand Central, there's a spot in the corner. And the spot in the corner has the names of some of people in construction who had come up with the idea of using lemon to clean the ceiling of the main kind of thoroughfare, which is
Interesting.
Constellation. And it was basically a homage to the people who built and then protected this amazing city assets. I would say it's a national treasure for me. So I sat on the train, and one of the things when you work, in finance, you learn to look at industry. So what's the addressable market? What's margins? Is there an opportunity? And by the time I got home, I told my husband, I was like, I want to work in construction. And the reason was it had about a 9% total addressable market because you need size. Uh, it had lots of gray hair. It had not very much innovation. So my kind of playbook was try to bringing in innovation to the construction industry.
Okay, sure.
So that's how I got into construction. And I worked away in construction technology for about 8 years. And actually, I went up to Buffalo. This was probably 3 years ago to try to go to the Buffalo Bills Stadium. And I had gotten this WBE certification, which during that time, there was a big push to have diversity on job sites. And one of the leaders, actually, it's someone from John LaRoe from Gilbane. He's like, Lisa, can I give you some candid advice? And I was like, sure. And he said, look, we're spending $800 billion on MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We're going to spend more money on pizza and coffee than your construction technology. You need to do something that's going to move the needle. And I think you should repivot and look at either building or buying one of these, MEP companies.
Interesting.
So kind of armed with that information, I went out, and we're going to talk about later, lean startup. I went and sort of interviewed the marketplace and looked at opportunities.
So really kind of trying to decide if I'm going to do MEP, where do I need to land, right? Do I need HVAC? Do I need to go more electrical? Or as it turns out, you steered towards elevators.
Yeah. So I steered towards elevators. I looked at them. And in particular, what attracted me to elevators was what the feedback I heard from all the GCs was it was the least diverse place on the job site. It was a big pain point. So they were having trouble meeting some of their goals. This is then, it's less so now, but when I went down this path.
Right.
Okay?
Sure.
So this was a big pain point. And what I heard from like the big four was like, wow, if we could have someone that could create a value added service, that could use technology, this would be, manna from heaven. And it took me some time to get all the certifications and change. And so when I was ready for showtime, there had been changes in DC, and I probably didn't fully appreciate how much of that went from being, a tailwind to a headwind for my business model. But, always down the path of, and I think this is like a lesson that all entrepreneurs have to face is, and I talked about during my speech, the macro factors can change. And
Yeah,
so
sure.
as the macro factors change, you need to adjust to them and be more kind of forward looking.
Right. Well, and that's just one macro factor, right? I mean, the political headwinds or tailwinds, as you say, in DC could be one, but it could be, prices of steel. It could be, the world economy. It could be
any of those things.
Could be natural disasters, right? You never really know, and so being able to pivot and keep your eye on the ball is huge.
Yeah, I mean, and you can't sort of, and it could be dynamic. So like one of the big dynamics I think that's happened in vertical transportation is going back in 2017, you had private equity enter the market. And this was a group who is not part of the traditional elevator industry. And they've been very aggressive, both on the supplier side as well as on the services side. The thesis that I have, it's going to forever change some of the dynamics of the industry, because once you have a new perspective and a new player, the ecosystem is never going to be the same, right? I remember in Australia, they brought in camels because the country before they had railroads. And so one of the big problems they have is all of a sudden they had a railroad, so camel railroad, who won, right? But they had still all these wild camels in the middle of Australia. And what does it mean for the ecosystem? I mean, that's like a colorful way to think about it. But in a way, the change for the elevator industry is you now have financial buyers involved, and their approach and how they evaluate business is different. So, like one of the things, it's customer service. Like, how is that valued then versus now? Before or after private equity gets on, is what's the value of the family relationship, and so I think one of the things one has to always be aware of, and take the time once a year to kind of have a regroup and think about some of the macro and micro drivers of your business.
Yeah, I like that. And honestly, it ties back to the presentation you made at the conference where you're talking about, really focusing on key customers, right? Because I think those relationships have always been core to the industry, but I think as you're saying, as different changes happen or different parties come in with different interests, I think it intensifies the need to have relationships, but it also makes you think about, okay, which ones are really critical and which ones do I need to focus on the most?
Yeah, and this was you and I talked about it during that presentation. There was another kind of theme that came out very strongly during the conference, is AI and what AI does for your business. And I'm a huge fan of AI. I use AI. I'm all in, but I think AI makes the value of that personal relationship even stronger, because they're A, harder to make, and B, there are more and more people who are very uncomfortable with picking up the phone and developing a relationship with someone. Like, when I went to the last NIC conference, the one in Houston, before, I was kind of deciding, like, who do I want to get closer to? And one was from a very large asset owner. And I sent my email, but what I did was I called, and he picked up the phone. He's like, sure, I'll meet you at the conference. And we spent like 2 hours, together. And I asked him at the end, I'm like, why did you actually decide you want to meet with me? He said, well, you were the only one out of the 500 emails I got that called me. And when you called me, you sounded kind of interesting and entertaining. So that's why I took it. So what that tells you is that ability to connect with people, that human element, is actually even more valuable, because the 499 other people said, oh, I sent an email. So what I was trying to do with that presentation, and if you did that presentation, 10 years ago, it really would be the same presentation.
Sure.
It's try to find those one or two people or three people who've made your business. I mean, and who have been consistent, loyal partners, and who'll go the distance for you. And there are not that many of them.
Sure. Oh, well, and what can you do to make sure you keep delivering for them so that they can keep showing up in the same, strong way? Because if you take them for granted, you may not have them next month.
Yeah, and it's really easy, it's the shiny new coin, right? The new relationship, the new technology, the new company is way cooler than someone who's been consistent and loyal. I would take another view. I would say that consistent person that's been loyal to you is, a blessing to your business and to your life, and you have to really defend and protect it.
Right. Yeah. And that is what I got from your presentation. I think I even asked afterwards, what are some good tools? I think you kind of turned it around and said, well, it's really in your mind, right? You've got to think about it. You got to spend some time analyzing what customers are the most valuable to you and how do you take care of them. It's not like you can read a book or, back to AI. You can't just ask AI, oh, what can I do to keep my customers? You know what to do. You already know.
Another part of it is getting to know is a good idea too. There are some customers that just not going to work for you. And I think, I'm not a quitter, right? And sometimes that's at my own peril. So sometimes you're just better off to say, you know what? Not a good fit for me. Better for me to like move on, cut my losses and move on, and let me find that ideal customer that's going to resonate and they're going to value what I bring to the table.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So you talked a little bit, you just briefly, you mentioned a book called Lean Startup that really kind of helped you,
Yeah.
I guess with the the decision to go to the elevator industry, but also kind of that research process. Talk a little bit about a couple of principles you glean from that that could be really helpful to our listeners.
So this is all based on, it started in lean manufacturing. So the sort of historical version of manufacturing is, I'm going to build the coolest car known to mankind, and everyone's going to stand up and buy my. But as we talked about, is R&D, it's field of dreams. Like, I'm going to build a dream, this beautiful place, and everyone's going to show up. Well, with Kevin Costner in the movies, it happens, but in real life, it doesn't. So the idea between lean startup, which started in manufacturing, is the same thing, is you come out with a minimal viable product. So we have the picture of this pen, right? So it's not the completed pen. It's kind of a light version.
Prototype of sorts.
Prototype, that's a better word. A prototype of the pen. And then you'll go out and you'll interview people or potential clients who you think would be potential clients or supporters of this new prototype.
Mm-hmm.
What happens in the process, sometimes your prototype is a dog. Better you don't build the field, the dream, and it's a nightmare.
Sell the farm and sure.
Or they'll come up with ideas of what their pain points are, their ideas of how to solve, improve this manufacturing outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And then during the process of conversation, you're basically building some of your ideal customers, because you go back to them and say, hey, that was so insightful. I, in fact, built this pen, and it's exactly has the properties that you thought about. What do you think? And, it's kind of like nobody thinks their baby is ugly, right? So you've already made them to be part of your team. So they're going to want to support your success. So that's the kind of concept behind it. And so when I started down this path of the elevator business, I had this thesis. I went out and tested my thesis by talking to general contractors, talking to various people in the elevator industry to build whether there was in fact a need for the type of company I wanted to build. And, this was in a different political environment. And there was a lot of pain points of meeting some of, the WBE goals. And there was a need to have more transparency on the construction site vis-a-vis the vertical transportation industry. And there was, a sort of an ask for more technology and innovation. And so I had built some of these customers. And I think about one in particular. And I met him through one of the big GCs, and it was their big elevator operator. So I got a very warm introduction. So their bigged client said, hey, can you talk to this person? And of course, the elevator prime was more interested in talking to me. But, two things happened. I had to impress him the first time we met, or it was going to be one and done. And then I had to engage him as to be on my board of advisors, this
nice. Okay.
Technology. And he's really been fantastic. So there was this pivot. He's like, you did too much on the technology. You got to play down the technology. Just keep it simple. Like, stop with the technology, focus on components like the doors, the entrances, the fixtures, the
Right.
lighting. Like, no. Just calm down with the technology. Like, keep it simpler. And I've stayed in touch with him. And actually just recently we were talking about who makes an ideal customer. And I went to an event for actually a private client side who really cares about diversity and inclusion. And my first call was to him, and I was like, oh my God. And he said, they are your ideal customer, Lisa. You need to focus on them. They're your golden goose. I tried to say it to you, but now you understand. I was like, oh, I didn't get it. So sometimes you get the information, you don't hear it the first time because it doesn't really, kind of click in your mind. So that's why having that market research and having not even that many, a few of these people who will tell you the dirty little, the ugly truth, they're invaluable.
Yeah. I'm intrigued, that you're obviously talking with some of the majors, and that you learned pretty quickly to come to the NAEC events, because from my experience, a lot of the majors, they don't go to the NAEC shows, at least not the spring conference, right? Maybe they show up at the fall expo in bigger numbers. But how many of the people you were interviewing said to you, hey, you need to get involved with NAEC?
None of them.
So how did you find
Well, I
it?
did research, like in every organization, there's like, one go-to location. It's kind of like, how do you find a restaurant when you go into a new town, right? You talk to a foodie, and then, or if you talk to four foodies and they say, this is the place you got to go, you go and check it out. So I went to my first NEC event in Atlantic City in the fourth quarter of 2024. And I was like, oh, I get it. I went to kick the tires and I saw, what was happening at the tire event. I went to my first spring conference, which was March of last year, I actually got mixed views on, some people are like, oh, it's a boondoggle. Other people are like, oh, it's good, you know. But then, but I was like, okay. And I just happened to get to speak. I was on a panel and then I had one event, somebody took a flyer on me and it was really useful for me professionally. And so that's why I was happy to go back.
Good. Yeah. No, I mean,
You got to test it out, right? Because someone could say this is the greatest thing ever, and you go, and it could not be the greatest thing for you.
sure,
It could
sure.
be a great thing for other people.
Well, and I think back to your presentation, right? Who are you meeting, right? And if you're meeting the right people, well, then yeah, this is the place you need to hang out. And that's one thing I've found is there's great people to meet. There's people I want to meet, and so it was actually a customer that first told me, hey, you need to go to the NAEC thing, and I didn't think it didn't seem to make sense to me. And I said, I feel like I'm a little bit of an outsider, right? I'm not. He just said, shut up and come. So I did.
When was your first NEC event?
It was in Tucson. So right at the end of COVID, or maybe it was in the middle of COVID. It was like 5 years ago. And it was fairly small because of COVID. And I think they may have skipped one or two before that. But um, I felt very welcomed. I felt, like this is a great group of people that I want to get to know, and been going ever since.
That's great. But
Yeah.
you found, this word, you found your tribe, right?
Yep. Yep.
So that's all, again, I keep on banging the drum on it. It's your ideal customer profile, but it's also your ideal community, right? As my grandmother used to say, every pot has its lid. So you have to be, I guess, confident enough. Some places aren't going to be for you. And you have to figure out what are the places that are going to work for you.
Sure. Well, and you don't know till you go, right? And I think that's what you were saying is, hey, I showed up to see what's here and who can I meet, and is this where I need to keep coming? I really value that about your research is also very much uh, experiential, right? I'm just going to go. I'm going to go talk to so and so. I'm going to call so and so. I'm going to be there. I'm going to experience it and see what I get out of it. So I do want to ask you a little bit about you and I talked a little bit about innovation, and I'm curious, for your insights. Given that you are kind of new to the industry, are there some innovations you think I mean, I'm assuming that you could bring some innovations, but where would you see innovation being the most valuable in the elevator industry?
Well, we talked about, I think one risk for the elevator industry is you're seeing this generational shift. People are retiring. So there are people who've been in the elevator industry for 40 and 50 years. And the stock of knowledge, like, you don't want it to just dissipate, right? So there's a company called Airwaves, which basically captures tribal knowledge and information. Like, I think that's an incredibly, incredibly valuable piece of software that I hope it becomes more prevalent. So once those people are gone, how do you recreate 50 years of knowledge? It's impossible, right? So I think that's a technology that the industry should promote. The other, part, I'm very attracted to the whole idea of remote monitoring, which is having to do with my own views. So I didn't tell you the other reason. There's a riddle I'm trying to solve. I've been trying to solve this for 10 years. I haven't solved it. But according to the American Society of Engineers, it's going to take $2.6 trillion to get U.S. infrastructure back into critical awareness state. And under the last administration, we signed this $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, which was the largest in 70 years, like since Eisenhower. For my math, we're short $1.4 trillion. So we need to think about how are we going to construct and also maintain our assets to extend their life cycle. I did another presentation about Elevator U, about the whole idea of the life cycle of an elevator is 20 to 30 years. There's a huge capital impact if your elevator lasts 20 years or 30 years.
For sure.
Huge. So I'm personally attracted to remote monitoring and using more predictive maintenance because I'd like to see those elevators last 30 years and not 20 years. And so that's another technology that I'm hugely a fan of.
Cool. Very cool. No, I mean, and obviously there's a lot of emerging technologies. You had mentioned AI, and right, and some of that's being used to monitor or to give insights into the equipment. Well, we're getting close on our time here. I guess what I wanted to end with is just kind of some insights, in your short stay in the elevator industry. What are some insights that that you've seen, that you really feel like are valuable to share?
So I think that all businesses, it's really the talent of the people. So this whole idea of human capital management. And it seems to me the most important players in having a long-term successful business is having those quality mechanics. And and I think they're artisans, they're craftsmen. And I think in US society, there's this like, go to college, you got to go to college. And if you look in other countries like Germany, there's a respect for someone who works with their hands, who's mechanical, who makes an impact. And so part of my own wisdom slash agenda is to really elevate the value and respect those people have. Cause like without that, you've got some serious problems in the vertical transportation business. So how do you give those people the respect they deserve? How do you respect their opinions? How do you capture it for the long term? And if they've done all the studies, if you're just motivated by money, that's short term. But it's like, how do you leave that sense of pride and workmanship? If I was running a service provider, I'd really spend a lot of time. How do you get those people that have their hands on the equipment to understand that you value who they are and the work they do?
Sure. No, I think, yeah, there's probably not enough that can be said about human capital management, and I know that a lot of the companies I work with, they know that intuitively, right? That the talent you either have or don't have, that's the biggest limiting factor to growth over and over. And so, yeah, taking care of your people, like I say, letting them know that you value them, that you're going to invest in them, that they're in a good spot, because as soon as the culture turns toxic, right, they're likely to say, you know what, this is not for me. I need to find a new place.
Yeah. And, one of the things, if you're on high, and we talked about the advent of private equity, it's really easy to say, like, we can improve the margins by, getting these people less, giving them less time off. We're going to take away some of, their turkey at Thanksgiving. But the ramifications of doing that are much larger than anyone thinks, because if you haven't spent time in the community and understand the nuances to the elevator and escalator industry, on paper, I'm like, sure, you know, we're not because you have to be deep in the weeds of understanding how important this group of people is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you kind of touched on, other countries that maybe value that more than we do. What I've found is that so many of those folks really, really want to do a good job. And when they're stretched too thin and they're not allowed, and hey, you've only got 30 minutes to do a 2-hour job, they don't feel appreciated, and they don't feel like they can really let their talent shine. And it's like, no, I want to do a good job. And so I think that is key to keeping the talent happy.
And I kind of think if you talk to asset owners, they understand that too. So I think if you build a trust with them and you say, look, this is the real cost of doing this job. If they trust you, they would probably pay the extra money.
Sure. Yep. That's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah, because they have skin in the game, right?
And that's why if it's transparent and they trust you, they'll understand that, that this job isn't a half an hour job. It's, a 2-hour job, and it's going to extend the life cycle of their asset. I don't know, maybe not all of them, but many of them might agree to that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, Lisa, it has been a pleasure and a privilege, and I appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you reached out, and thanks to the NEC for having us meet together. I think Vanessa was the person that introduced us.
Yeah,
Vanessa
absolutely.
Klein.
She did.
So Vanessa Klein has been incredible with helping my own vertical transportation and introducing me people, and the work she's done of Women in Motion. So she's an ideal friend in the elevator business.
Yeah.
I didn't talk
Awesome.
about that in my presentation, but thanks, Vanessa, and thanks, Matt, for all you've done and to reach out to me. So onward and upward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk again soon.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group, a leader in elevator industry recruiting. Please visit our YouTube channel at Elevator Careers, or check us out online at elevatorcareers.net. Please like and subscribe, and until next time, stay safe.